Well, the Boston Marathon, which is the most elite running event in the world, just announced that the transgender women in general, but that would be biological males who identify as women, will be allowed to race in the women's part of this year's race. This year, at least 5 transgender runners will be competing in the women's division, despite advantages they may have due to higher testosterone levels, among other potential physical advantages. What are the rules exactly? Nell Daly is a psychotherapist, and she joins us tonight. So Nell, my point really isn't to make a case against transgenderism. I strongly think that biology is real and that we shouldn't ignore it. But that's not really the point I want to make. I want to ask a series of sincere questions about what qualifies you as a biological man to compete as a woman, because there's an actual fairness question here to women. So what does that mean exactly? For the purposes of the Boston Marathon?
So what the Boston Marathon, it seems like to me, has done, and I've been reporting on transgendered athletes for a long time now, and I think what they did was they adopted the policy that was set forth by the U.S. Track and Field Committee, which followed what the the International Olympic Committee also set forth as to what to do with transgendered athletes. So they have, if you identify, let's say you're born a man, but you identify as a woman and you qualify as a woman, then you're able to compete as a woman on the day of the race. But you have to qualify and compete in the gender in which you qualified for, if that makes sense.
It doesn't make sense, because it doesn't answer the basic question, which is, what are the criteria for qualifying as a woman? So why wouldn't, I mean, men have physical advantages that are inborn, that are biological, and so it puts them at sort of a great advantage over the women against whom they're competing. So how do I qualify as a transgender female athlete? Why couldn't any man say, I identify as a woman now, and beat a lot of women unfairly?
Theoretically, they could. So it's not as if the Boston, it's not as if these athletic committees are necessarily asking for a full history of these athletes. If a man decided to compete as a woman and ran all those qualifying races as a woman, then on game day, they're allowed to compete as a woman. Now, the interesting fact
what are the criteria? But what are the criteria? Like, how do we determine if someone's a woman for the purposes of competing in the women's event? Like, how do we, other than a person's word for it?
Well, what they have
historically,
to do is
you took a blood test.
Well, so here's the issue. What they do is they ask for you to present a government ID. So it's what you identify as, not necessarily what you're born as. And where this issue gets a little bit more complicated, and will get more complicated as time goes on, is that states now are starting to say that people have the choice of being considered non-binary and checking that off on their government IDs. So if you have 1.4 million people now in this country identifying as transgendered, and transgender is an umbrella term for many things that fall under it, and then you start issuing, states start issuing government IDs where people can choose
I get it. So there are no rules. I mean, we're just making it up as we go along, which is fine. I mean, if the purpose is to make people feel good, I get it. I'm not attacking anybody. But if there are actual prizes at stake, or jobs, or marathons, it might be nice to have some rules. Anyway, we're out of time. Nell, thank you. Good to see you.